And 4 years ago, when I was at the height of my hedge fund powers, I used to rock up and give speeches saying, don't worry, there'll never be hedge fund regulation because they'll never be able to define what a hedge fund is. And obviously I suffered from a failure of imagination because it never occurred to me that the EU would define a hedge fund as being anything that isn't a unit trust. Anything that isn't a UCITS fund. It never occurred to me that they may succeed in that argument. So I'm telling you, you've heard it before. You've heard it in hedge fund land, where there are UCITS funds, and hedge funds, frankly, are everything else, which obviously can't be true. And because alternative investment funds have been drafted defined so broadly as being anything that isn't a UCITS fund, the regulation sucks as a consequence. And I worry that if we define classic banks narrowly, and then shadow banks are everything else, including money market mutual funds, including, I think, credit hedge funds, etc. I fear that we're going to make the same mistakes all over again. So, to give you my summary first, I think we're confusing regulation with transparency. Okay, let's push on before Herman stands up. And we need to move this on the slide. Things not working. The gentleman at the top is going to help me. I'm moving on my slide. Someone's going to have to do it for him. Okay, it's working hard for us at the back. Can't see it because of the lights. What you'll see is a slide showing you the growth of the hedge fund industry. It's a fascinating slide. It shows some exuberant growth up until 2007, and then it shows you that hedge funds got patched up just like everything else did in 2008, and it's recovering gently since then. And total hedge fund assets are around $2 trillion. This makes my earlier point, what are we talking about? We're talking about all of this stuff. Never struck me that money market mutual funds are shadow banks. UCITS funds are also legal loan funds. Credit hedge funds, well, you'll hear from me how credit hedge funds can't be shadow banks because they don't look like banks. And you'll see that there's a lot of what I've learned to understand to be maturity and credit transformation. Always makes sense to use long words when the shorter ones could have done the job. You'll see how that's going on when, perhaps in ways which are unexpected ways. So this is exuberant growth in hedge funds. That's most of my career. And then I left the hedge fund industry around here, but it's good to see that it recovered. And indeed, interestingly, not many flows. A lot of this is a rebound in asset valuation rather than subscriptions and redemptions. This seems working really well now. The flows that have come in recently have gone into the large funds. So if you're a boutique startup fund manager, life is tough. I don't really have any advice for you, other than the fact that God really wanted it that way. If you're a large fund manager, you've really enjoyed the bulk of the inflows, which has happened recently. But banks might be too big to fail, but hedge funds aren't. Frankly, they go out of business all the time. They go out of business for reasons which are diverse. And if they go out of business, there's been no burden on taxpayers. So they frequently went out of business. A hedge fund going out of business isn't the same as a hedge fund going bust. Maybe the guy retired, maybe he failed in as much as he didn't raise any money, or his performance was too bad. Maybe he was so rich and he wanted to go somewhere in the Caribbean. Maybe they precipitously lost money. But I don't think that hedge funds going out of business have caused losses for the banks who lent them the money. So I don't think there's been a lot of hedge fund failure as such. A bank failing is a big deal. I don't think hedge funds have failed that much, although clearly many of them have gone out of business. These are hedge fund debts, many of which are, let's say, natural causes, and these are hedge fund burdens. So It looks a bit like the Spanish demographic, doesn't it? Not many kids at the moment being born in Spain. Of course, the one exception to this, which I don't have time to go into, is long-term capital management, which was a big deal back in 1997. But I don't have time in my speech to cover that off. Where the hedge funds borrow their money from? Well, they borrow their money from places which are pretty secure. This is prime brokerage borrowings, where the prime broker will lend you money and take control of your assets. So he's